My sister claimed our family vacation was indefinitely postponed, so I waited patiently. Then I bumped into her at the mall, deeply tanned and laughing. She admitted they went without me, using my $6,000 contribution. I didn't scream. I quietly opened my banking app and destroyed her life. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The fluorescent lights of the Westfield shopping center were already giving me a migraine, or maybe it was just the residual fatigue from a 60-hour work week. I was a senior supply chain manager for a global logistics firm. My life was governed by spreadsheets, precise timings, and the absolute certainty that a leads to be, but lately, my body had been rebelling against the stress. I was fighting off a lingering chest infection that had left me feeling hollowed out and fragile, a stark contrast to my usual efficient self. I had only dragged myself to the mall to pick up a prescription and perhaps find a comfortable pair of pajamas to hibernate in for the weekend. I looked a mess. No makeup, hair in a messy bun that wasn't stylish, just messy, and dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. I felt invisible, ghost-like, drifting through the crowds of happy weekend shoppers. Then I heard that laugh. It was a laugh I had known my entire life, bright, performative, and loud enough to turn heads. It was Sarah. I froze near the entrance of a high-end department store. My sister, Sarah, wasn't supposed to be here. She was supposed to be at her house, stressed out of her mind, trying to coordinate the rebooking of our family trip. For months, she had been telling me that the hotels were playing hardball, that the airlines had overbooked, and that the dates for our parents' retirement celebration were in flux. But there she was, and she looked incredible. She was walking arm in arm with a friend I didn't recognize. Sarah was wearing a new designer sundress I knew cost more than my rent, and her skin was a deep, radiant bronze. Not a spray tan, I knew the difference. This was the kind of sun-kissed glow you only get from spending 10 days under the equatorial sun. Her hair was lighter, bleached by UV rays, and she looked the picture of health and relaxation. "Sarah," I called out, my voice raspy. She stopped mid-laugh, turning on her heel. For a split second, her eyes widened, a flash of genuine panic, before the mask slammed back into place. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Zoe, oh my God," she exclaimed, rushing over to give me a hug. She smelled like expensive coconut sunscreen and duty-free perfume. "Look at you, you look exhausted. Are you okay?" I pulled back, my confusion overriding my illness. "I'm fine, just grabbing medicine. But I thought you were busy dealing with the travel agent. Did you manage to get the refunds sorted for the delay?" The friend next to her looked confused. "Refunds? Sarah, isn't that the trip you guys just got back from? The one to Cabo?" The air left my lungs. The background noise of the mall, the chatter, the music, the footsteps, seemed to drop away, leaving only a high-pitched ringing in my ears. I looked at Sarah. Her smile was frozen, brittle as glass. "Cabo," I whispered. "You went to Cabo." Sarah let out a nervous, fluttering laugh, waving her hand dismissively at her friend. "Oh, it was a last-minute thing, really. A scramble." She turned her gaze to me, her expression shifting into something patronizing, the way one might look at a confused child. "Zoe, honestly, I didn't want to bother you. You've been so swamped with work, and when the dates finally opened up last month, Mom and Dad just said, 'Let's go.' We figured you couldn't get the time off anyway." "You figured?" My voice was trembling. "Sarah, I paid $6,000. I transferred it to you 4 months ago. That was for the villa, that was my share." She rolled her eyes, shifting her weight to one hip. "And we used it. It was a family trip, Zoe. We upgraded the suite for Mom and Dad. It was beautiful. You should be happy. They had the time of their lives. Besides," she added, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, "you never explicitly said you were free those specific dates. It was a misunderstanding. Don't make a scene here." She reached out to pat my arm, her manicured nails gleaming under the lights. "We missed you, obviously. But you're always so busy making money. We didn't think you'd mind spending a bit of it on the family." I stood there, speechless. The audacity was physical, it felt like a slap. She hadn't just gone without me. She had taken my money, money I had worked overtime for, money I had saved specifically to celebrate Penelope and Dominic's retirement, and spent it on herself. She had lied to me for weeks. And now she was standing there, tanned and glowing, telling me I should be grateful. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a robbery dressed up as sisterly love. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. It was a rot that went deeper than I ever imagined. I don't remember saying goodbye. I don't remember walking away. The next thing I clearly recall is sitting in the driver's seat of my car in the parking garage, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. My phone sat in the passenger seat, a black mirror reflecting the concrete ceiling above. I felt physically ill. The nausea rolled in waves, compounded by the shock. I leaned my head back against the headrest and closed my eyes, but the image of Sarah's tan, that proof of her leisure purchased with my labor, burned behind my eyelids. I replayed the last 3 months in my mind, the texts, the calls. "Hey Zoe, the resort is asking for the deposit up front to lock in the ocean view. Can you send your half now?" "Zoe, bad news. The travel agent messed up the booking for next week. We have to push it. Don't worry, I'm handling it." "Zoe, just focusing on mom and dad right now. Things are so chaotic with the planning. I'll update you soon." It had all been a fabrication. A long con performed by my own sister. While I was sitting in my office at 8:00 p.m., eating vending machine crackers and reviewing shipping manifests to ensure I could afford this trip, she was likely sipping margaritas on a balcony I had paid for. I started the car, the engine rumbling to life, but I didn't put it in gear. I sat there, shivering despite the heat of the day. Why would she do this? But I knew why. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the control. It was about the narrative. To our parents, Penelope and Dominic, Sarah was the organizer, the doer, the one who made magic happen. I was just the financier, the distant ATM who was too busy to show up. She had probably spun a sob story to them. "Oh, poor Zoe, she's stuck at work again. She insisted we go without her. She just wanted you to be happy." She had stolen my presence. She had stolen my memories with our parents. A notification pinged on my phone. It was an automated email from my bank, daily balance summary. I picked up the phone and unlocked it. I stared at the numbers. I was comfortable, yes. I had worked incredibly hard to be comfortable, but I wasn't an endless well. That $6,000 was significant. It was a renovation on my kitchen I had postponed. It was a cushion for emergencies. But then, a darker, colder thought entered my mind. A thought that slowed my heart rate and steadied my shaking hands. Sarah had forgotten who I was. She saw me as the little sister, the quiet one, the one who avoided conflict and just wanted everyone to get along. She saw me as a supply chain manager, boring, logistical, safe. She forgot that supply chain management is about leverage. It's about knowing exactly where the resources come from, who controls the flow, and what happens when you cut that flow off. She had forgotten that while she played pretend as the matriarch of the family, I was the one who actually managed the infrastructure. Specifically, the Granville Family Trust. Our grandfather had left a modest but helpful trust fund. It wasn't millions, but it was structured to cover essential family maintenance. Because I was the only one with a finance background, grandfather had named me the sole trustee. For 5 years, I had signed the checks. I signed the checks for the private school tuition for Sarah's 2 kids. I signed the checks for the property tax and the mortgage payments on the old family cabin. The cabin Sarah and her husband lived in rent-free because she claimed they were saving up. I looked at the phone again. Sarah thought the $6,000 was a gift she could steal. She didn't realize she had just violated the moral clause of our unspoken agreement. "You really think I'm just an ATM?" I whispered to the empty car. "But you forgot one thing. ATMs have withdrawal limits, and yours just hit zero. To understand why this betrayal cut so deep, you have to understand the dynamic between Sarah and me. It wasn't new. It was ancient history, written in the drywall of our childhood home. Sarah, 3 years older, was the sun around which our family orbited. She was charismatic, loud, and dramatic. She was the creative one. She tried to start a jewelry business, it failed, and Mom and Dad bylaid her out. She tried to be an event planner, she got bored, and Mom and Dad paid her rent for a year. She married a man, let's call him Mark, though for this story, only Penelope, Dominic, and Sarah matter, who was just as flighty as she was. I, on the other hand, was the steady one, Zoe the rock, Zoe the boring one. While Sarah was backpacking through Europe, on Dad's credit card in our 20s, I was working 2 internships and finishing my MBA. When Sarah needed a down payment for a car she couldn't afford, the family looked to me. "You have so much, Zoe," Penelope, my mother, would say, her voice soft and pleading. "You know how hard Sarah tries. She just needs a little leg up." And I always gave it. I gave it because I wanted their approval. I wanted them to look at me with the same adoration they gave Sarah, but they never did. They looked at me with relief that I could fix the problems Sarah created. Sarah was currently between careers, a phrase she had been using for the better part of a decade. She presented herself to the world as a sophisticated stay-at-home mother and socialite. She drove a leased Rover, wore designer clothes she bought on resale sites, and posted curated photos of her perfect life on Instagram. But the reality was a house of cards. Dominic, my father, had retired from a mid-level civil service job. Penelope had been a teacher. They weren't rich. The only reason Sarah lived the lifestyle she did was because of the trust my grandfather left, and because I managed it with ruthless efficiency to maximize the yields so her bills got paid. I had spent years balancing the portfolio, arguing with tax accountants, and ensuring the dividends were enough to cover Sarah's mortgage on the family cabin so she wouldn't be homeless. I did this for free. I did this out of love. And how did she repay me? By looking me in the eye at the mall, with a tan bought with my money, and telling me I was too busy to be part of the family. The antagonist in my life wasn't a villain in a cape. It was a woman in a floral sundress who believed she was entitled to my labor. Sarah didn't just want my money, she wanted to consume me. She wanted my resources to fuel her image, but she wanted me to stay in the shadows, silent and working. She wanted the golden eggs, but she treated the goose like a servant. I finally put the car in reverse. As I backed out of the spot, my sadness began to calcify into something harder, sharper. I wasn't just the little sister anymore. I was the trustee. And the trustee had identified a fraudulent misappropriation of funds. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry in front of them. Sarah expected a tantrum. She expected me to complain to Mom and Dad, at which point she would manipulate them into thinking I was being petty about money. "It's just money, Zoe," she would say. "Family is more important." Exactly, family is more important. Which is why I had to protect the family assets from a thief. I drove out of the parking garage, the bright daylight hitting my windshield. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove toward the one place Sarah never went, the bank. It was time to pull the records. It was time to see exactly how deep the rot went. The bank was a fortress of glass and polished marble, a stark contrast to the chaotic, sensory overload of the mall. It was quiet here. The air conditioning hummed with a low, expensive efficiency. I sat in the leather chair across from Mr. Henderson, the senior account manager who had handled the Granville Family Trust since my grandfather passed. He looked concerned. He was used to me coming in once a quarter to sign off on tax documents or approve standard disbursements. He wasn't used to me storming in at 2:00 p.m. on a Saturday, eyes rimmed with red, demanding a full transaction history for the last 12 months. "Is everything all right, Zoe?" he asked, sliding a thick stack of printed pages across the mahogany desk. "We usually handle this via secure email." I'm afraid there might be some irregularities, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. I picked up the stack. It was heavy. I need to verify some compliance issues regarding the beneficiary disbursements. Of course, he nodded, adjusting his glasses. As the sole trustee, you have full oversight. If you need to initiate a freeze, we can do that with a single signature. A freeze. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. I opened the file. My eyes scanned the columns: date, merchant, amount. The trust was set up with specific rules. It paid for the maintenance and upkeep of the family cabin where Sarah lived, and it paid for educational expenses for her children. It was not a personal piggy bank. Grandfather had been very clear about that. He wanted to ensure the property stayed in the family and the great-grandkids got a good start. He didn't want to fund lifestyle creep. I flipped past the standard tuition payments. Those were legitimate. I flipped past the property taxes. Legitimate. Then I saw it. May 12th. Transfer to S&M Design Consulting. $4,500. May 28th. Transfer to S&M Design Consulting. $3,200. June 15th. Transfer to S&M Design Consulting. $5,800. The memo lines read, cabin HVAC repair, deck ceiling, emergency plumbing. I frowned. S&M Design. The initials Sarah and Mark. I pulled out my phone, ignoring Mr. Henderson's polite gaze, and opened the photos Sarah had sent to the family group chat over the last few months. I scrolled back to May. So relaxing at the cabin this weekend, just reading by the fire. There were no contractors in the background, no torn-up deck, no HVAC vans. I looked at the total for the last 6 months. Nearly $25,000 had been funneled into this consulting company. And then I thought about the $6,000 I had sent her personally for the vacation. She had taken my cash, yes, but she hadn't just used that. She had likely billed the trust for the travel expenses too, disguising them under some other vague heading. I looked up at Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson, who is the authorized signatory for the maintenance debit card. That would be your sister, Sarah, he said. As the resident of the property, you authorized her to have a card for emergency repairs up to $500. Anything larger requires an invoice. And these, I pointed to the thousands of dollars in transfers. These are larger than $500. She submitted invoices, he said, turning his monitor so I could see. They looked standard. We processed them as urgent structural repairs per the standing instruction. He clicked a file. An invoice popped up. It was a Word document template. No tax ID, no professional license number, just a logo that looked like it was made in Microsoft Paint. My heart hammered against my ribs. She wasn't just stealing my vacation money. She was embezzling from the trust. She was faking repairs to siphon cash out of the estate, cash that was supposed to protect the house for the future. Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register. I need you to freeze all outgoing assets from the Granville Trust immediately. I want to revoke all secondary cards, and I need a stop payment on the tuition checks for next semester pending a full audit. Mr. Henderson's eyebrows shot up. The tuition checks, Zoe, school starts in 3 weeks, if those bounce. Then perhaps the parents should have paid them, I said, closing the folder. Freeze it, all of it, today. Very well, he said, typing rapidly. It's done. I walked out of the bank into the blinding afternoon sun. I didn't feel sick anymore. I felt like a loaded gun. It took exactly 3 hours for the consequences to hit. I was at home, sitting at my kitchen island with a glass of wine and my laptop. I had created a new spreadsheet. Column A, legitimate expenses. Column B, fraud. My phone buzzed on the counter. The name Sarah flashed on the screen. I let it ring. It stopped. It started again immediately. I took a sip of wine and swiped accept. Hello. Zoe. Sarah's voice was high, frantic, and laced with that particular tone of indignation she used when a waiter got her order wrong. Something is wrong with the account. I'm at the grocery store and the card just declined. I tried it 3 times. It was embarrassing, Zoe. I have a cart full of food. Which card? I asked, feigning ignorance. The cabin card, the trust card, she snapped. Obviously, Mark is out of town and I needed to grab groceries for the kids. Fix it, please. I'm holding up the line. I can't fix it, Sarah, I said calmly. I froze it. There was a silence on the other end, so profound, I could hear the background beep of the checkout scanners. You what? Her voice dropped an octave. Why would you do that? I was at the bank today, I said, reviewing the quarterly statements. There were some irregularities, specifically regarding S&M Design Consulting. I've initiated a forensic audit to trace those funds. Standard procedure when fraud is suspected. So, the accounts are frozen until the investigation is complete. Fraud, she laughed, a sharp, nervous bark. Zoe, don't be ridiculous. Those were repairs. The deck was rotting. You know how old that cabin is. You're overreacting because of the vacation thing, aren't you? This is petty, Zoe, really petty. Is it? I leaned back in my chair. I drove by the cabin 2 weeks ago to drop off Mom's birthday gift, Sarah. The deck looked fine. In fact, it looked exactly the same as it did last year, and I checked the state business registry. S&M Design Consulting isn't a licensed contractor. It's a sole proprietorship registered to Mark's personal email address. So what? She shrieked, abandoning the pretense of confusion. So Mark fixed the deck, he did the work, we saved the trust money by doing it ourselves. We just billed for his labor. That is totally legal. Billing $5,000 for deck sealing that leaves no visible evidence is not labor, Sarah. It's theft. And using the trust card for groceries? That's strictly forbidden. The trust is for maintenance and education, not your weekly shop at Whole Foods. I am raising your nieces and nephews, she screamed. I am keeping the family hoe. Me standing, you sit in your fancy apartment with your corporate job and your no-kids lifestyle, hoarding the money grandfather left for all of us. You have no idea how expensive it is to live. I have a very good idea, I countered, my voice hardening, because I've been paying for it, but that stops today. You can't do this, she hissed. The tuition checks go out on Monday. If you don't unfreeze that account, the kids lose their spots. Do you want that? Do you want to be the reason innocent children get kicked out of school? I'm not the reason, Sarah. You are. You spent their tuition money on a trip to Cabo. I did not. I know you went, I cut her off. I saw you. I saw the tan. I saw the bag. You took my $6,000 and you took God knows how much from the fake invoices, and you went on a luxury vacation while telling me it was postponed. You didn't just steal from me, you stole from your own children's future. You unfreeze that account right now, she threatened, her voice low and venomous. Or I call Mom and Dad, and I will tell them exactly how cruel you're being. I will tell them you're having a breakdown. I will destroy you, Zoe. Call them, I said. In fact, put them on speaker when you do. I have the bank statements printed out. I'm sure they'd love to see where their retirement party money actually went. I hung up. My hand was shaking as I put the phone down, not from fear, from adrenaline. The bridge wasn't just burned, I had nuked the foundations. Sunday morning brought the expected storm. I woke up to 14 missed calls from my mother, Penelope. I made coffee, sat on my balcony, and mentally prepared myself before dialing her back. Zoe, Mom picked up on the first ring. She was crying. Not the soft, sniffly crying, but the full-blown, heaving sobs that used to make me crumble as a child. Zoe, what is going on? Sarah called us in hysterics last night. She said you cut them off. She said you're trying to evict them. I'm not evicting them, Mom, I said, keeping my voice level. I froze the trust accounts because money is missing. Missing? Sarah said it was a misunderstanding about some paperwork, Mom wailed. She said you're angry because you didn't go on the trip, and now you're punishing the kids. Zoe, how could you? It was just a vacation. We missed you, but you were so busy. Sarah said you told her you couldn't make it. I closed my eyes, a sharp pain shooting through my chest. There it was, the lie. "Mom," I said, "I never said I couldn't make it. Sarah told me the trip was canceled. I paid $6,000 for that trip. Did she give it back to you?" "What?" Mom stopped crying for a second. "You paid," Sarah said. "She said she and Mark treated us. She said it was their gift." "She lied, Mom. I paid for the villa. She took my money, told me the trip was off, and then took you guys anyway. And that's not all." "I don't believe it," Mom said, her voice hardening. "Sarah wouldn't do that. She loves us. She's been so stressed, Zoe. You know how she gets. Maybe she got confused with the dates. But you, cutting off the school money, that's malicious. Dad is furious. He wants to talk to you." "Put him on," I said. "Zoe," my father's voice boomed. Dominic was a stern man, a man who valued order and hierarchy. "Fix this. Now, I don't care what squabble you two have. You do not leverage the grandchildren's education. Unfreeze the account." "I can't, Dad," I said. "Legally, I can't. As trustee, if I suspect embezzlement and I allow funds to continue flowing, I am liable. I could go to jail. Do you want me to go to jail?" "Embezzlement," he scoffed. "Don't use big words to scare us. Sarah borrowed some money for repairs. She transferred $25,000 to a shell company in Mark's name for repairs that never happened," I said, dropping the bomb. "I have the invoices, Dad. I have the photos. The work wasn't done. The money is gone. It funded their lifestyle. It funded the trip you just went on." He faltered, "that's a serious accusation." "It's a fact. And I'm hiring a forensic accountant tomorrow to go back 5 years. Because if they stole $25,000 in 6 months, I hate to think what they've taken since I took over." "Zoe, stop," Mom's voice came back on, sounding terrified now. "Please, don't involve police or lawyers. We can work this out as a family. Just come over, come for dinner tonight. Sarah will be here, we'll talk, please." "I'm not coming to dinner to be gang-pressed into silence," I said. "No," Dad said, his voice quieter now, less sure. "No gang-pressing. Bring your proof. If what you say is true, we need to see it. But if you are lying to hurt your sister, Zoe, I will never forgive you." "I'll be there at 6, I said, "and tell Sarah to bring her receipts." I spent the rest of the day building the case. I wasn't just going to bring a spreadsheet. I was going to bring a PR. Execution. I called a friend of mine in real estate to pull the permit history for the cabin address. 0 permits pulled in the last 3 years. I called the supplier Sarah claimed to have bought the high-end HVAC unit from listed on one of her fake invoices. They had no record of a sale to her or Mark. I printed out the text messages where she claimed the trip was postponed. I printed the bank transfer receipt of my $6,000 sent to her personal account. By 5:00 p.m., I had a red binder. It was 3 inches thick. I looked at myself in the mirror. I wore a sharp black blazer and trousers. I didn't look like the sick, tired girl at the mall anymore. I looked like the senior supply chain manager who fired incompetent vendors for a living. Sarah had spent her life manipulating emotions. She was a master of tears, guilt, and charm. She could twist reality until up was down, but she couldn't twist math. Math is relentless. I picked up the binder. The confrontation tonight wouldn't be a screaming match. It would be an execution. Sarah thought she could talk her way out of this, that she could cry and blame, stress, and get Mom and Dad to force me to apologize. She was bringing tears to a gunfight. I was bringing the ammunition. As I walked to my car, my phone pinged one last time, a text from Sarah. "Don't you dare ruin Mom and Dad's happiness. If you do this, you're dead to me." I didn't reply. I just got in the car. I didn't want to be her sister anymore. I wanted to be the one thing she evidently feared most, accountable. The family dining room had always been a place of warmth, roast chickens, holiday laughter, and the smell of my mother's cinnamon candles. Tonight, it felt like a courtroom. The air was stagnant, heavy with unspoken accusations. I arrived exactly at 6:00 p.m. Sarah was already there. She sat at her usual spot to the right of Dad, sipping a glass of red wine with a trembling hand. Mark wasn't there. Apparently, he was working late, which I knew was code for hiding. Mom looked like she hadn't slept in 24 hours. Her eyes were puffy, and she was wringing a napkin in her hands. Dad sat at the head of the table, his face a mask of stone. I walked in and didn't sit down. I placed the 3-inch red binder on the table with a heavy thud that made the silverware rattle. "Zoe," Sarah started immediately, her voice shrill and defensive. "Before you start with your little presentation, I just want to say that I think it's disgusting you're doing this. Dragging Mom and Dad into a financial dispute over a few clerical errors, it's beneath you." "It's not a dispute, Sarah," I said calmly, taking my seat opposite her. "And they aren't clerical errors." "I told them," she interrupted, turning to Mom. "I told them I borrowed against the trust for the trip because my liquidity was tied up in the business, and I intended to pay it back. I was going to surprise you with the reimbursement check next week. Zoe just panicked and froze everything before I could fix it." Mom looked at me, hope flickering in her eyes. "See, Zoe, she intended to pay it back. It was a loan." "A loan requires paperwork, Mom," I said, "and it requires consent. But let's put the embezzlement aside for a second. Let's talk about the trip." I opened the binder to the first tab. "Sarah told you I was too busy to come, right?" "Yes," Dad said, his voice gruff. "She said you had a major project launch." I slid a printed screenshot across the mahogany table. It was a text thread from 3 months ago. "Me sent $6,000. Can't wait for the trip. Are the dates locked? Sarah, got it, booking the villa now. So excited. Sarah, 2 weeks later, disaster, resort overbooked. We have to postpone indefinitely. I'll hold the money until we rebook." "I didn't know the trip was happening," I said, my voice trembling slightly as I looked at my father. "I found out yesterday, at the mall, when I saw her tan." Dad picked up the paper. He read it once, then twice. He looked at Sarah. "You told us Zoe canceled," he said. The volume of his voice didn't rise, but the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "You told us she pulled out at the last minute." I didn't want you to worry," Sarah stammered, her face flushing. "Zoe is busy. I figured if I told you the dates were open, she'd feel pressured to come and be stressed the whole time. I was protecting her." "You were protecting the $6,000 you stole from me," I corrected. "Because you used my money to upgrade your room, didn't you? The oceanfront suite, the one you posted on Instagram." I flipped the page. A screenshot of her Instagram story, "Blessed Sweet Life Upgrade." "That was my money, Sarah." "It's just money," Sarah screamed, slamming her hand on the table. "God, you are so greedy. You have a career. You have savings. Mark and I are struggling to build a brand, and we just wanted one nice week for the family. Why can't you just let it go?" "Because you didn't just steal from me," I said, flipping to the second tab, the thickest section. "You stole from the children." "Don't you dare bring my kids into this," she hissed, her eyes narrowing into slits. "You brought them into it when you drained their tuition fund," I said. I slid the bank statements to Dad. "S&M Design Consulting," I read aloud. $25,000 in 6 months. Dad, look at the invoices." Dad put on his reading glasses. He picked up the sheets. I saw his jaw tighten as he scanned the amateurish formatting, the lack of tax IDs, the vague descriptions. "Deck ceiling," Dad read. $5,000. I was at the cabin last week, Sarah. The deck hasn't been sealed, the wood is gray." "Mark did it with a clear coat." Sarah lied, desperate. "It's a special matte finish." "I pulled the permit history," I said, sliding the next document over. "No permits for HVAC, no permits for plumbing. And I called the supplier listed on this invoice for the AC unit. They've never heard of you." The room went silent. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. "It's fake," Dad whispered. He looked up, his eyes wet. He looked old. "Sarah, these are fake." "We needed the money." Sarah broke down, the tears finally coming, hot and angry. "Mark's business went under, okay? We have debt, credit card debt. We were drowning. The trust has so much money just sitting there. Grandfather is dead, he doesn't need it. Why should that money rot in a bank account while we can't even afford to eat out? So you stole it, Mom whispered, her hand covering her mouth. You stole from your grandfather's legacy, from your children's school fund. I was going to put it back, Sarah sobbed. Once Mark's new design firm took off, it was a temporary fix. Zoe is just jealous because she's alone and miserable and I have a family. I'm not the one who stole from my parents' retirement party, I said, my voice cold steel. I'm not the one who lied to my sister, and I'm certainly not the one who is about to be homeless. Sarah froze. What? The trust owns the cabin, I said. I am the trustee. The trust allows for family residence subject to good conduct. Embezzlement is not good conduct. I'm serving you with an eviction notice effective in 30 days. You can't, Sarah shrieked, standing up and knocking her chair over. Mom, Dad, stop her. She's evicting her own nieces and nephews. Mom looked at Dad. Usually, this was the part where they caved. This was the part where they told me to be the bigger person. But Dad was still looking at the invoice. The fake invoice that represented his father's hard-earned money being funneled into margaritas and designer dresses. He stood up, he didn't look at me, he looked straight at Sarah. You lied to us, he said, his voice was shaking. You took Zoe's money, you took the trust's money, and you looked me in the eye for a week in Cabo and pretended everything was fine. Dad, please. Get out, he said. What? Sarah gasped. Get out of my house, Dominic said, pointing to the door. And you better start packing, because if Zoe says you have 30 days, you have 30 days. I won't stop her. In fact, if she didn't evict you, I'd ask her to step down as trustee. Sarah looked around the room, wild-eyed. She looked at Mom, but Mom had her head in her hands, weeping silently. She looked at me, and I held her gaze, unflinching. She grabbed her purse. Fine, fine, ruin my life, see if I care, you're all toxic anyway. She stormed out. The front door slammed so hard the windows rattled. In the silence that followed, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel happy. I felt an exhaustion so deep it went to my bones. But underneath the exhaustion, there was relief. The cancer had been cut out. The fallout was messy, as these things always are. Reality isn't a movie. The credits don't roll the moment the villain leaves the room. The forensic audit took 3 weeks. It revealed that Sarah and Mark had siphoned nearly $40,000 over 2 years. Not enough to bankrupt the trust, but enough to hurt. They had treated it as a secondary income stream, a salary for existing. I didn't press criminal charges. That was the one mercy I granted for the sake of the kids, but the eviction stood. Sarah and Mark had to move into a 2-bedroom apartment on the other side of town. It was a steep step down from the lakefront cabin. Mark had to get a real job. I heard he was working sales at a car dealership. Sarah was forced to actually budget. The hardest part was the silence from the kids. Sarah had poisoned them against me, telling them Auntie Zoe kicked us out. It hurt, but I knew that one day, when they were older, they would understand that I was the one who ensured their tuition was still paid. Because I didn't cut off the school. I paid the school directly. I would always support them. I just wouldn't support their parents' delusion. A month after the dinner, I went to my parents' house for a quiet Sunday lunch. The atmosphere was different. The tension that had defined our family dynamic for decades, the need to tiptoe around Sarah's moods, the pressure to prop her up, was gone. It was quieter, yes, but it was honest. We sat on the back porch, watching the leaves turn orange. I'm sorry, Mom said suddenly. She was looking at her coffee cup. Zoe, I'm so sorry. It's okay, Mom, I said automatically. No, it's not, Dad interrupted. He looked at me with a clarity I hadn't seen in years. We enabled her. We let her take advantage of you because it was easier than confronting her failures. We put the burden on you to be the adult because we knew you could handle it. That wasn't fair. You shouldn't have had to handle it alone. I felt a lump form in my throat. It was the apology I had been waiting for my entire adult life. We missed you in Cabo, Mom added, reaching out to squeeze my hand. It wasn't the same without you. We kept saying, Zoe would love this view, or Zoe would know what this fish is. We really missed you. I missed you too, I whispered. Next year, Dad said firmly. We're going again, just the three of us, and I'm paying, no trust money, no contributions from you. I'm taking my daughter on a vacation. I smiled, a real genuine smile that reached my eyes. That afternoon, I drove past the mall. I saw the spot where I had run into Sarah. It felt like a lifetime ago. The woman who had stood there, sick and trembling, afraid to speak up, was gone. I had lost a sister, in a way. We haven't spoken since that night, other than through lawyers. But I had regained something much more valuable, my self-respect. I drove home, opened my laptop, and logged into the trust portal. I reviewed the statements. Tuition, paid. Property tax, paid. Maintenance fund, secure. The supply chain was back in order. The resources were flowing to the right places. The leaks were plugged. I closed the laptop and poured myself a glass of wine. For the first time in years, the ledger was balanced, and the silence in my apartment didn't feel lonely. It felt like peace.